Hey guys, tonight we are heading down under. But not the Australia you see on postcards, with the shiny Sydney Opera House and surfers catching a lazy wave. No, we're going back in time, to the 19th century, to a place that's dusty, vast, and humming with a quiet rage. It's a land of stunning beauty and breathtaking cruelty, where the punishment for stealing a loaf of bread back in England could be a one-way ticket to the other side of the world. Frankly, if you were robbed there with your modern sensibilities, you'd probably be arrested for looking at a police officer the wrong way, so maybe it's best you're just listening from your bed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel find other night owls like us. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments what city you're in and what time it is for you. It's always a quiet thrill to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Alright, picture this. You're standing on reddish brown earth, baked hard by a sun that feels less like a gentle warmth and more like a celestial bully. The air smells like something you've never smelled before. A dry, medicinal scent of eucalyptus mixed with dust and the distant promise of rain that might never come. This is colonial Victoria, Australia, in the mid-1800s. And you, my friend, are not one of the lucky ones. This whole grand experiment, this continent-sized prison-turned colony, is built on a rigid, unspoken caste system. At the top, you have the squatters. The name is a bit of a historical inside joke. Really, they were wealthy, usually English, settlers who arrived early, squatted on enormous, fertile tracts of land, tens of thousands of acres, and then used their money and influence to have their claims officially recognized. They own the best land, the best rivers, the best everything. They are the establishment, the law, the money. They are the ones who write the rules. And then there's you. You're a part of a different crowd, the selectors. Most of you are Irish. Your families didn't come here by choice. They were either convicts themselves or, more likely, the children of convicts. Or perhaps they fled the Great Famine in Ireland, hoping for a fresh start. You're haunted by a history of being ruled by the English back in the old country. And you've arrived here only to find the same power dynamic, just with more flies and stranger-looking trees. The government passed laws, the Selection Acts, that were supposed to give people like you a fair go. They allowed you to select a small plot of land to farm, usually around 320 acres. It sounded good on paper, but here's the catch. The land available for selection was almost always the leftover stuff, the geological equivalent of table scraps. It was rocky, heavily wooded, or had poor access to water. The squatters had already claimed the prime real estate, so you find yourself trying to plow a field that's more stone than soil, or clearing an impossibly dense forest of stringy bark and iron-bark trees, where the wood is so hard it practically mucks your axe. It's backbreaking, soul-crushing work, and the system feels designed to make you fail. To make matters worse, the local police, often English or loyal to the English squatters, watch your every move. They see your poverty not as a struggle, but as a sign of moral failing. They see your Irish heritage, your Catholic faith, and your lingering accent as marks of suspicion. This is where you learn about the bush telegraph. It's not a real machine with wires and poles. It's the network of whispers, gossip, and warnings that flits from one selector's hut to another, carried by kids on horseback or shared over a cup of tea. It's the way news of police patrols, or a neighbor's trouble, travels faster and more accurately than any official mail. It's a community bound by shared hardship and a deep, simmering distrust of authority. You learn who to trust, who to avoid, and how to look like you're minding your own business, even when you're listening with every fiber of your being. This simmering pot of resentment is the world a certain boy is growing up in. A boy named Ned. His family, the Kellys, are textbook examples of this struggle. Irish, Tour, and already on the local constable's naughty list. They are trying to make a life on a patch of dirt that doesn't want to give anything back, surrounded by a system that seems to be waiting for them to make one wrong move. Historians still argue about the intent behind those land acts. Were they a genuine, if flawed, attempt at fairness, or were they cleverly designed from the start to maintain the power of the wealthy squatters? For you, living it, the academic debate doesn't matter. All you know is the gnawing hunger in your belly and the constant, watchful eyes of the law. You feel trapped, and when people feel trapped, they often look for a way out. Any way out. For now, you just keep your head down. You watch, you listen, and you learn the quiet, bitter language of survival. You watch, you listen, then you learn. And one of the first and hardest lessons comes from the head of the Kelly household himself, John Kelly, known to everyone in the district as Reed. The name isn't just about his fiery Irish hair. It's about a spirit that refuses to be completely extinguished, no matter how much the world tries to stamp it out. Reed is your neighbor, in the loosest sense of the word. His family's hut is a few miles of dusty track away from yours. You know his story, because everyone knows everyone's story out here. He was a Tipperary man, transported to Van Diemen's Land, what they now call Tasmania, for stealing 2 pigs. 2 pigs, a crime of desperation, not malice. After serving his time, he made his way to Victoria, met a tough, vibrant woman named Ellen Quinn, and started a family, trying to go straight on his small, uncooperative patch of land. But the past has long claws, and in this colony, the title ex-convict is a stain that never quite washes out. It's a permanent handicap in the game of life, so when trouble comes knocking, it tends to knock on doors like Red's first. The trouble, when it arrives, is small and pathetic. It's about a calf. Their neighbor, a man named Clooney, reports a young calf missing. A few days later, he finds it wandering near the Kelly's property. Now, in the bush, cattle getting mixed up is as common as flies at a barbecue. It's usually sorted out between neighbors, but Cooney goes straight to the police. A constable named McCormick, a man with a particular dislike for the Kelly clan, rides out to investigate. You can almost picture the scene. Young Ned, maybe 11 or 12 at the time, watching from the doorway of the smoky, crimped slab hut. He sees the policeman's shiny boots and the smug look on his face. McCormick questions Reed about a cowhide HES seen standing nearby. Reed says it's from one of his own beasts. McCormick demands proof. The whole system of ownership out here is a strange and archaic business. A mix of brands burned into the animal's flank and unique notches and slits cut into its ears. The hide is the receipt. Reed, for whatever reason, can't produce the part of the hide with the brand or the ears to prove his story. And that's it. That's all the evidence they need. It's Red's word, the word of a poor Irish ex-convict, against the accusation of his neighbor and the suspicion of the constable. You can guess how that plays out in court. The magistrate barely listens to Reed's side of the story. He is sentenced to a fine, which he can't possibly pay, so it's converted to 6 months of hard labor for unlawfully possessing a hide. Not even for cattle theft, mind you, but for possessing a piece of skin without the right paperwork, so to speak. To this day, historians and armchair detectives argue over it. Was Red Kelly really trying to steal a calf? A clumsy act for a man who knew the bush? Or was he simply the victim of a vindictive neighbor and a prejudiced legal system looking for an easy target? The truth of it is lost to time, buried under a mountain of bias. For young Ned, the academic debate is meaningless. What he sees is his father, a proud man, being publicly shamed, convicted on the flimsiest of charges, and taken away in chains to break rocks under that relentless sun. He sees his mother, Dylan, left to manage a farm and a brood of young children all on her own. The injustice isn't abstract. It's the empty chair at the dinner table. It's the weary look in his mother's eyes. It's the gnawing feeling that the people in uniforms aren't there to protect you. They're there to pounce on your first mistake. Red Kelly is released from prison a broken man. The hard labor has shattered his health. He develops what they call dropsy, a severe swelling and fluid retention. and his spirit is gone. Within a few months of coming home, H.E.S. dead. H.E.S. buried in an unmarked grave. Another forgotten casualty of the colonial machine. But he leaves a powerful legacy, not of criminality, but of martyrdom. He leaves behind a son who is just seen, in the most brutal and personal way possible, how the system works. Ned is now the man of the house. The weight of his family's survival falls onto his skinny, teenage shoulders. The shadow his father casts is a long one, and it doesn't point toward a life of quiet obedience. It points down a different path. It's a path paved with a deep and abiding resentment, a conviction that the law is a weapon used by the rich against the poor. The lesson he learned was crime doesn't pay. The lesson he learned was they will come for you anyway, so you might as well fight back. With Red gone, the Kelly homestead becomes an even more intense hub of that informal information network. The Bush Telegraph. It's less a choice and more a necessity. Ellen Kelly, Ned's mother, is a force of nature. She is tough, resourceful, and fiercely protective of her children. She has to be. A widow with a large family and a reputation tainted by her late husband's conviction is an easy target. The squatters want her land. The police want to catch her family breaking the law, and survival is a day-to-day battle. You find yourself drawn into their orbit, as many of the local selectors are. You might drop by with a bit of surplus milk or a few potatoes, and, in exchange, you get the latest news. The air in their cramped wooden hut is thick with it. It's a place where grievances are aired, strategies are quietly discussed, and alliances are forged over endless cups of strong, stewed tea. You learn to read the room. You see who is visiting, who is whispering in the corner with Ellen. You hear about Constable Hall, who seems to have a personal vendetta against the family, harassing the younger boys for riding their horses too fast. You hear about Mr. Woody, the local squatter, complaining that his cattle are going missing, his eyes always seeming to drift towards the Kelly's small selection. This is the world of the selectors, a world invisible to the authorities in Melbourne. It's a parallel society with its own rules, its own loyalties, and its own system of justice. Information is currency. A warning about a police patrol setting out from the nearby town of Benalla is worth more than gold. A tip-off that a Stockton station agent is asking questions about unbranded horses can save a family from ruin. This Bush Telegraph is fueled by a shared identity. You are all selectors. You are mostly Irish, and you all feel the boot of the establishment on your necks. A threat to one family, especially a family as prominent in the struggle as the Kellys, is a threat to all. So when Ned or his younger brother, Dan, needs a place to lay low for a few days, a network of sympathetic households is ready to help. A horse can be hidden in a neighbor's gully, a bed can be found in a barn, and a plate of food can be left on a stump at the edge of a clearing. It's a silent, well-oiled machine of mutual support. A key element of this, a strange little detail of bush life, is the role of the children. Kids on their ponies are everywhere, running errands, checking fences, or just exploring. They are largely invisible to the police, who dismiss them as simple farm children, but these kids are the eyes and ears of the Bush Telegraph. They see everything. They notice the strange horse tied up outside the police station, the new trooper who's arrived in town, the way the squatters' men are riding the boundaries of their property. They carry messages, not written down, but memorized, from one farm to the next. Their childish game's a perfect cover for a low-level intelligence network. Historians have long debated the extent and organization of this network. Was it a highly coordinated, conscious web of resistance, a kind of proto-rebellion, or was it simply an organic, ad hoc system of mutual aid that grew out of shared circumstances? The truth, as is often the case, probably lies somewhere in the middle. For you, living it doesn't feel like a grand conspiracy. It feels like common sense. It feels like watching out for your own. You watch young Ned grow into this world. H.E.S. becoming a man, not just in age, but in reputation. H.E.S. a superb horseman, able to ride through the dense, treacherous bush as if he were born in the saddle. He has a sharp mind and a charismatic, if sometimes brooding, presence. He understands the power of the telegraph. He knows how to use it, how to feed it information, and how to read its subtle signals. He's learning that a reputation, in this world, is a shield. If people believe you are tough, if they believe you are wrong, they will protect you. He starts to embody the defiance of his community when he looks a policeman in the eye. He is not just Ned Kelly, the son of a dead convict. He is the collective anger of the selectors staring back. The police see a budding criminal, a larrikin destined for prison. But you, and the dozens of families connected by the invisible wires of the Bush telegraph, you see something else. You see a champion in the making, a leader, and you know, with a certainty that settles deep in your bones, that his story is just beginning. The whispers about Ned Kelly are starting to get louder, and they're traveling further than ever before. The whispers about Ned are getting louder, and it's not all about his brooding defiance. There's another side to him, a flash of something unexpected that cements his local reputation long before he ever becomes an outlaw. It's an incident that happens when he is just a boy, around 10 or 11 years old, not long before his father's arrest. It's a story that gets told and retold around the campfires and in the selector huts, becoming a piece of local folklore. You're by the banks of Hughes Creek, a windy, often treacherous waterway near the town of Avenel where the Kellys are living at the time. The creek is swollen from recent rains, its currents brown and murky, filled with snags and hidden dangers. The son of the local hotel owner, a young boy named Richard Shelton, is playing near the wooden bridge when he slips and falls into the churning water. He can't swim. The current immediately grabs him and pulls him under. Panic erupts. People are shouting, running along the bank, but no one is going in. The creek is a known killer. Then, without a moment's hesitation, young Ned Kelly throws himself into the water. He is just a skinny kid himself, but he fights his way through the cold, fast-moving current, reaches the drowning boy, and somehow manages to drag him back to the safety of the bank. It's an act of pure, unthinking bravery. The Shelton family is overcome with gratitude. They are a respected family in town, and to show their appreciation, they present Ned with a gift, a beautiful green silk sash, fringed with gold bullion. It's a gentleman's sash, a symbol of honor and heroism, a far cry from the rough-spun clothes of a selector's son. Ned accepts it with pride. He wears it under his shirt for the rest of his life. Even on his very last day, this story matters, because in a community where the Kellys are increasingly seen as troublemakers by the authorities, it provides a powerful counter-narrative. It shows that the boy has courage, that he has a core of decency. It's a fact that complicates the simple good versus evil story the police want to tell. It's a reminder that he is one of their own, a local hero. But the world isn't a fairy tale. Acts of heroism don't erase the grinding poverty or the constant police scrutiny. As Ned enters his mid-teens, the friction between him and the law becomes almost constant. It starts small. He is arrested at 14 for allegedly assaulting a Chinese pig and fowl dealer named Fuk, who accused Ned of helping another man rob him. The charges are dismissed. A year later, he is arrested again, this time for allegedly sending an indecent note to a local married woman, a charge that also gets thrown out but adds another black mark to his name in the police ledger. These are minor, almost trivial scrapes, but they create a pattern. Constable Hull, the local lawman, seems to be watching his every move. The most significant of these early clashes involves a hawker named McCormick, no relation to the constable who arrested his father. Ned is accused of assaulting and robbing him. The details are messy and disputed. As always, McCormick's story changes several times. Ned claims he was in a fight, but there was no robbery. But this time, the charge sticks. He is sentenced to a few months in jail. This is his first real taste of the inside of a cell. It's here that the cold reality of his father's fate starts to feel less like a memory and more like a prophecy. The strange, almost bizarre, little detail from this period is the sheer pettiness of some of the accusations. One of the most famous, and frankly ridiculous, Charges brought against him was for riding a horse across a footpath. It's the 19th century equivalent of a jaywalking ticket, yet it's recorded with the same seriousness as everything else. It speaks volumes about the kind of policing the Kellys and their community were subjected to. A relentless, nitpicking harassment designed to catch them on any technicality, no matter how small. Historians still debate the motivations behind this. Was it a genuine, if overzealous, attempt to maintain order in a rough frontier society? Or was it a targeted campaign, a way for the police to assert their dominance over a family and a class they viewed as inherently insubordinate? For you, standing on the outside looking in, it looks like a self-fulfilling prophecy in motion. The police expect Ned Kelly to be a criminal, so they treat him like one. They follow him, question him, arrest him, and every interaction, every charge, whether it sticks or not, pushes him further away from the straight and narrow. The path of quiet farm life seems to be closing off. Gate by gate, the path his father walked, the one leading from a minor offense to a prison sentence, is looking more and more familiar. The heroism of the drowning rescue and the petty crime of the footpath ride exist side by side, creating a portrait of a young man at a crossroads. He has goodness in him, but the world seems determined to squeeze it out. The world seems determined to squeeze the goodness out of him, and it's doing a pretty good job. Each stint in jail, each courtroom appearance, acts like a whetstone, sharpening his resentment. But it's after his release from one of these sentences that he encounters a figure who will truly complete his education in the outlaw arts. This isn't a formal apprenticeship. It's a collision of two worlds in the dense, secretive wilderness of northeastern Victoria. The man's name is Harry Power. Harry Power is already a legend in the bush, and not a good one if you ask the authorities. HES an old-school bushranger, an escapee from Melbourne's notorious Bentridge prison, and a master of survival in the wild. HES what they call a bolter, a man who has completely cut ties with society and lives by his wits and his gun. HES known for a series of daring, if sometimes clumsy, mail-coach robberies and for his uncanny ability to vanish into the landscape. HES a ghost, a bogeyman the police have been hunting for years. You hear the whispers about him on the bush telegraph. They say he has a network of hideouts in the rugged hills of the King Valley, caves and secluded gullies known only to him. They say he can live for weeks on nothing but bush tucker and stolen flour. They say HES getting old, though, and maybe a little lonely. He needs a young apprentice, someone with local knowledge, strong legs, and a healthy disrespect for the law. And that's where Ned Kelly, now a strapping teenager with a growing rap sheet, enters the picture. The exact circumstances of their meeting are shrouded in myth, a classic case where historical fact and campfire storytelling have become hopelessly entangled. Some say the Kelly family, through their network of sympathizers, deliberately connected Ned with Harry, seeing it as a way for the boy to learn survival skills from the master. Others claim it was a chance encounter in the bush, a meeting of two kindred spirits who recognized the outlaw in each other. The academic consensus, if you can call it that, is that the Kellys likely knew of Power's whereabouts and facilitated the connection. Whatever the truth, Ned falls in with Harry Power. For a time, he becomes the old bushranger's shadow. You can imagine it? A crash course in a curriculum you can't get in any school. Lessons are held under the stars. In the cold mountain air, Harry teaches Ned the secret pathways through the Wombat Ranges, the art of tracking, and how to hide your own tracks. He teaches him how to watch a homestead for days without being seen, learning the comings and goings of its owners. He teaches him how to handle a pistol, how to bail up a mail coach, and, most importantly, how to use fear and reputation as weapons. But this isn't a partnership of equals. Ned is the student, the lookout, the horse handler. HES the one doing the grunt work while Harry plans the jobs. Habits aren't little-known aspect of their time together is Harry Power's peculiar brand of gentlemanly robbery. He had a rule against robbing women, and he would often engage his victims in long, rambling conversations, almost as if he were more interested in the company than the cash. On one occasion, he reportedly shared a drink with a man GD just robbed. It was a strain, theatrical style of crime that was already becoming outdated. Ned, however, is a quick study, and HES also fiercely independent. The student soon begins to chafe under the master's authority. He sees the flaws in Harry's methods. He finds the old man arrogant, sometimes careless, and not nearly as formidable as his reputation suggests. The final straw, according to legend, is a botched robbery where Harry accidentally fires his gun. A rookie mistake that could have brought the police down on him. Ned is disgusted. He sees no future in this life of petty stick-ups and constant running. He wants something more. Or perhaps something different. The alliance dissolves. Ned leaves Harry Power to his lonely fate in the mountains and returns to his family. His head now filled with dangerous knowledge. The experience changes him. HES, no longer just a disgruntled farm boy. He has now had a taste of the outlaw life. Seen it up close. HES learned its mechanics, its freedoms, and its profound loneliness. HES seen that the legendary Harry Power is just a tired old man, and the police who hunt him are often clumsy and inept. The system, from both sides, looks flawed and vulnerable. He hasn't yet chosen that path for himself, but he now knows the way. The police, of course, soon learn of his association with the famous bushrunner. In their eyes, the prophecy is now fulfilled. Ned Kelly isn't just a potential criminal anymore. HES a graduate of the best outlaw school in the colony. His name is now permanently linked with the most wanted man in Victoria, and the target on his back has just grown a whole lot bigger. The target on his back is bigger, and his patience with the system is worn down to a thread. After his brief, disillusioning internship with Harry Power, Ned tries to settle back into a semblance of normal life. He works odd jobs, timber cutting, fencing, even helping with the harvest on neighboring properties. HES trying, it seems, to walk the straight and narrow, but the law has a long memory and a distinct lack of imagination. To them, he is, and always will be, Harry Power's apprentice. Every missing sheep, every stray horse, every bar fight in a 5-mile radius seems to lead them back to the Kelly door. The breaking point, the moment that arguably seals his fate and hardens his heart for good, comes in 1871. It's another horse story. Horses are everything in the bush. Transport, status, livelihood. They are also notoriously difficult to keep track of, and the laws around branding and ownership are a tangled mess, easily exploited by those with ill intent on both sides of the law. A local man named Isaiah Wildwait borrows a mare from the Kellys to ride to the nearby town of Wangaratta. While HE is there, he gets into some trouble, and the police impound the horse. When Ned goes to claim it, HE is arrested. The police claim the horse isn't his, that it belongs to the local schoolmaster. The situation is a classic, he said. She said, Ned insists the horse is legally his, that he bought it fair and square. Well, right, a man whose nickname probably tells you all you need to know about his reliability, gives a confused and contradictory account. The police, led by the ever-suspicious Constable Hall, are convinced they finally caught Ned red-handed in a serious crime. Horse theft. In the 19th century Australian colonies, stealing a horse was a major felony, seen as almost on par with robbing a bank. It could land you in prison for a very long time. You find yourself in the courtroom again, watching the inevitable drama unfold. It's a farce. The evidence is flimsy, relying on the testimony of a man of dubious character and the pre-existing belief that Ned Kelly is a thief. Ned, now a confident and articulate young man, defends himself fiercely. He explains the chain of ownership. He calls witnesses, but it's no use. The verdict is a foregone conclusion. He is found guilty. The judge sentences him to 3 years of hard labor in Pent Ridge Prison, the same brutal institution his mentor Harry Power had escaped from. 3 years, for a horse he still claimed was his. The sentence is a hammer blow. It's not just the loss of freedom. It's the profound, searing injustice of it. He is sent to Melbourne, chained and humiliated. Pent Ridge is a hell on earth. It's a place of cold stone, monotonous labor, and systematic degradation. The prisoners are subjected to the silent system, a cruel psychological regimen where they are forbidden from speaking, gesturing, or communicating in any way. The aim is to break their spirit, to turn them into docile, obedient numbers. You can imagine Ned in this environment, 18 years old, simmering with rage, forced into silence. He does his time. He breaks rocks in the quarry, his hands blistering and bleeding. He endures the solitary confinement, the bad food, the casual cruelty of the warders. This is where any lingering faith he might have had in the legal system is burned away. He is not just a victim of a flawed system anymore. He is a product of it. The prison is supposed to reform him, but instead, it incubates his anger, transforming it from a hot, flashing rage into a cold, hard resolve. A strange little detail of his time in Pentridge is that his mother, Gillian, was also sentenced to 3 years for her role in a later incident. For a time, mother and son were imprisoned simultaneously, a fact that surely amplified Ned's sense of persecution and his burning desire for retribution against the man he blamed for it all. The question of this horse has, of course, been debated by historians for over a century. Was Ned actually guilty? Did he duff the horse, altering its brands to disguise it, as the police claimed, or was he, as he and his supporters maintained, the victim of a conspiracy, a convenient scapegoat for Wild right and the police force desperate to put him away? The definitive proof is lost, but the impact is crystal clear. When Ned Kelly walks out of Pentridge in 1874, he is a different man. The boy is gone. The larrikin is gone. He is 20 years old, but his eyes hold the weary hardness of a much older man. He has paid his debt to society, a debt he believes he never owed. He returns to his family as Selection, a place that now feels less like a home and more like a base of operations. He has been pushed, and pushed, and pushed. He is now standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into the abyss of open rebellion. The authorities think they have taught him a lesson. They have, but it's not the one they intended. They've just created their own worst enemy. HES their own worst enemy. An HES back on their turf. After his release, there's a period of tense, watchful quiet. Ned is working, trying to keep his head down, but the air is thick with the memory of injustice. He is a marked man. The police watch him, and he watches them right back. The fragile peace is shattered in April 1878 by an incident so pivotal, so disputed, that it becomes the catalyst for everything that follows. It is the moment the first domino is pushed, setting off a chain reaction that will end in blood and fire. It's known as the Fitzpatrick incident. You have to picture the scene at the Kelly homestead. It is small, isolated slab hut, miles from the nearest town. Inside is Ellen Kelly, with her baby and a few other family members and friends. Ned is not there. His younger brother Dan, now a teenager, is a lone police officer, a young and rather inexperienced constable named Alexander Fitzpatrick, rides up to the house. HES had a few drinks at a nearby hotel, a fact that will become crucial later. His official reason for being there is to execute a warrant for Dan Kelly's arrest on a charge of, you guessed it, horse theft. What happens next is a vortex of conflicting testimonies, a messy tangle of claims and counterclaims that historians are still trying to unravel. This is Fitzpatrick's version of the story. He arrives at the hut and tries to arrest Dan. The entire Kelly clan, led by the ferocious Ellen, attacks him. He claims Ned Kelly suddenly appears, shoots him in the wrist, and holds him captive. He says Ellen attacks him with a fire shovel. After a terrifying ordeal, he says, they let him go, but only after Ned himself helps dig the bullet out of his wrist with a pocket knife. He rides back to town, a wounded hero, and reports a vicious, unprovoked assault and attempted murder by the notorious Kelly family. Now, here is the Kelly's version, which they will stick to until their dying days. Fitzpatrick arrives at the hut drunk. He has no warrant with him. He makes inappropriate advances towards their sister, Tate Kelly, Dan, defending his sister's honor, shoves Fitzpatrick, and a scuffle breaks out. Fitzpatrick, flustered and drunk, draws his revolver. As he stumbles, the gun goes off, or he clumsily injures his own wrist on the door latch. There was no gunshot wound. Ned was not even there. He was miles away working at a sawmill. The story of him shooting the constable and digging out the bullet is a complete fabrication. A lie told by Fitzpatrick to cover up his own incompetence and unprofessional conduct. So who do you believe? The lone, slightly drunk constable with a story that sounds like a dime novel adventure, or the family of known troublemakers with every reason to lie? The authorities, of course, believe their man. The story of a police officer being shot is explosive. It's an attack on the crown, on the very symbol of law and order. They don't wait to investigate the inconsistencies. They don't question why Fitzpatrick didn't seek immediate medical attention for his supposed gunshot wound in the nearby town, instead riding miles out of his way to another. A tiny, peculiar detail that cast doubt on Fitzpatrick's story is the shovel. Alan Kelly was accused of attacking him with a large, heavy fire shovel, but the Kelly's fireplace was a simple, open hearth. Later searches of the property found no such shovel. It was likely a detail Fitzpatrick invented to make the assault sound more dramatic. The debate over the Fitzpatrick incident is the absolute core of the Ned Kelly legend. Was Ned truly a budding murderer who fired on a police officer in cold blood? Or was he an innocent man, framed by a lying cop, whose only crime was being related to his family? The academic world is fiercely divided. Some historians argue that the forensic evidence, or lack thereof, supports the Kelly's version. Others maintain that while Fitzpatrick may have embellished his story, the core of it, that he was assaulted by the family, was true. For you, in the selector community, the truth is obvious. You trust the Kellys over the police any day of the week. You know Fitzpatrick's reputation as a drinker and a man of poor character. You know the family has fierce loyalty to one another. The idea of them attacking a policeman to protect Kate from unwanted advances sounds far more plausible than an unprovoked attempted murder. But what you believe doesn't matter to the law. Based on Fitzpatrick's testimony, the wheels of justice, or injustice, grind into motion with terrifying speed. Warrants are issued for the arrest of Ned and Dan Kelly for attempted murder. Their mother, Dylan, and two family friends are arrested as accessories. In a trial that is widely seen as a sham, Helen Kelly, holding her infant baby in her arms in the dock, is sentenced to 3 years of hard labor for her supposed role in the assault. The judge, Sir Redmond Barry, the same man who would later sentence Ned, infamously tells her that if her son Ned were there, he would receive a sentence of 15 years. This is the point of no return. Ned hears the news of his mother's sentence while HES in hiding. His mother, imprisoned on the word of a man he considers a perjurer. His younger brother, a wanted man, and he himself, accused of a crime he swears he didn't commit. The law isn't just an antagonist anymore. It's a predator. It has attacked his family, his mother. The choice is no longer between obedience and defiance. It's between surrender and war. And Ned Kelly does not do surrender. Ned Kelly does not do surrender. The news of his mother's sentence is like a lit match tossed into a barrel of gunpowder. The injustice is so profound, so personal, it burns away any last shred of hope for a peaceful resolution. He and his younger brother, Dan, who had been in hiding since the Fitzpatrick incident, now have no choice. Turning themselves in means facing a court presided over by men like Judge Barry. A court that has already condemned their mother on flimsy evidence. It means certain conviction and a long, slow death in prison. The only alternative is to run, to become what the law has already declared them to be. Outlaws. They don't just run to the nearest town or a neighboring colony. They melt into the one place they know better than the police. The one place that has always been their sanctuary and their playground. The bush. Specifically, they head for the rugged, impenetrable wilderness of the Wombat Ranges. This isn't just a patch of forest. It's a vast, sprawling labyrinth of steep-sided gullies, dense scrub, and towering mountain ash trees that block out the sun. It's a place where a man can disappear for weeks, months, even years if he knows what he is doing. And the Kelly boys know. You can imagine the moment of decision. A hurried conversation in a sympathetic neighbor's barn. The stars cold and distant through the gaps in the timber walls. They gather what they can. A couple of sturdy horses, a sack of flour, tea, sugar, a rifle or two, and their wits. Then, under the cover of darkness, they ride. They leave behind the small, cleared patches of farmland and plunge into the primordial gloom of the forest. The Wombat Rangers are a character in this story, a silent, powerful ally. The police, mostly city boys or men more accustomed to patrolling open country on horseback, are at a severe disadvantage here. Their bright blue and white uniforms are like beacons against the muted greens and browns of the bush. Their horses struggle on the steep, rocky terrain. They are tied to roads on established tracks. The Kellys, on the other hand, are like water. They flow through the landscape. They know the secret animal tracks, the hidden springs, the rock overhangs that provide shelter from the rain. They grew up here. This isn't a hostile wilderness to them. It's their backyard. Life in hiding is hard. It's a constant state of alert, a life of cold nights and damp dawns. They live off the land as much as possible, shooting kangaroos or wallabies for meat, supplementing their diet with supplies secretly provided by their network of sympathizers. This is where the bush telegraph becomes a lifeline. A selector's son will leave a package of bread and salt at the base of a uniquely shaped gum tree. A message, wrapped in oilcloth, will be tucked into a hollow log, warning them that a police patrol was seen heading north from the town of Mansfield. This support is their lifeblood. Without it, they would be caught within weeks. A little-known aspect of their survival in the bush was their incredible knowledge of bushcraft, learned not just from their own experience but also likely from local Aboriginal people and seasoned bushmen. They knew which plants were edible, how to find water, and how to read the signs of the weather. There's a detail often overlooked, the sound of the bush. To an outsider, it's either silent or a cacophony of strange bird calls. To Ned and Dan, every sound meant something. The sudden alarm call of a kookaburra could signal an approaching stranger. The way the leaves rustled could betray a clumsy footstep. They were attuned to the rhythms of their environment in a way the police could never be. Historians still debate the degree to which the boys were truly lost in the wilderness versus how much time they spent hiding in plain sight, staying in the barns and shearing sheds of their many supporters. The answer is likely a bit of both. They used the deep bush as a secure base, a fortress to retreat to, but they moved constantly within their network, a phantom-like presence that the police were always one step behind. The police, meanwhile, are getting frustrated. They send out patrols, heavily armed and full of confidence, only to have them return weeks later, exhausted, bitten by leeches, and with nothing to show for their efforts but torn uniforms. They are chasing shadows. They question the selectors, but are met with a wall of silence or misleading information. The Kelly boys are everywhere and nowhere. The longer they evade capture, the more their legend grows. They are no longer just Anna and Ned Kelly, the fugitive sons of Helen Kelly. They are becoming something more mythic. Symbols of defiance, bush spirits thumbing their noses at the clumsy, flat-footed authority of the crown. They are proving that in this vast, wild country, the official law of the land doesn't always have the final say. The law of the bush is stronger. And for now, they are its kings. For now, they are its kings. But a kingdom of two is a lonely and precarious thing. Hiding in the Wombat Ranges is a strategy for survival, not victory. Ned knows this. He is a strategic thinker, and he understands that to escalate his war against the authorities, he needs more than just a good hiding spot and a network of sympathizers. He needs a gang. He needs loyal men who share his grievances and are willing to risk everything. He doesn't have to look far. The first to join them is Joe Byrne. Joe isn't some hardened criminal. He is a childhood friend of Ned's from the area. He is intelligent, well-spoken for a selector's son, and known for his sharp wit and his loyalty. He's also something of a poet, known to scribble verses in his spare time. But like the Kellys, H.E. has grown up feeling the sharp end of the law. H.E. has been in trouble for minor offenses, and he harbors a deep-seated resentment for the police, who he feels have harassed him and his family. H.E. is also fiercely loyal to his friends. When he hears that Ned and Dan are on the run, his decision to join them is almost instinctual. H.E. is drawn to the romance of the outlaw, life into the charismatic pull of his old friend. Ned, Joe becomes the gang's lieutenant, the thinking man, and its primary scribe. The fourth and final member of the core group is Steve Hart. Steve is younger, more of a follower than a leader, but what he lacks in strategic brilliance he makes up for in daring and horsemanship. He is known as a bit of a showman, a flashy rider who loves a good horse and a bit of adventure. His family are also selectors, and HES had his own run-ins with the law over the usual issue. Horses. HES facing charges that would likely see him locked up for a significant time. For Steve, joining the gang is a pragmatic choice as much as anything else. His future in conventional society looks bleak. The outlaw life, with all its risks, at least offers a kind of freedom and the promise of excitement. So, the Kelly gang is formed, not in a smoke-filled room with a formal oath, but organically, in the damp chill of a bush hideout. For young men, none of them yet 25 years old, bound together by friendship, shared injustice, and a lack of other options. Ned is the undisputed leader, the strategist and the muscle. Dan is his loyal brother, the half-witted youth. Joe is the clever, articulate second in command, and Steve is the eager, fearless rider. Their motivations are complex, and this is a point historians love to dissect. Were they primarily social rebels, fighting for the rights of the poor selectors against a corrupt establishment? Or were they just a group of young criminals who used the rhetoric of social justice to justify their actions? The truth is, they were likely a tangled mess of both. They were undoubtedly driven by personal grievances, the imprisonment of Ellen Kelly being the ultimate catalyst. But their struggle resonated so deeply with the selector community precisely because it mirrored their own. The Kelly gang became the armed wing of the Bush Telegraph's discontent. A curious, and often forgotten, detail about the gang's formation is the ethnic and social makeup. All were of Irish descent. All were from the selector class. This wasn't a random collection of criminals. It was a band of brothers from a specific, marginalized community. Their fight was, in many ways, a continuation of the centuries-old conflict between the English and the Irish, transplanted to the strange new soil of the Australian bush. Their slang, their loyalties, their deep distrust of the Protestant, English-dominated police force. It was all part of their cultural inheritance. Now, as a unit of four, their dynamic shifts. They are more confident, more capable. They can watch each other's backs. They can plan more ambitious undertakings than just hiding and surviving. They start training, practicing their shooting, and planning their first move. They are no longer just fugitives. They are an active rebellion in miniature. They are stockpiling not just anger, but also ammunition. The police, meanwhile, hear whispers of this new alliance through their own network of informers. The threat level escalates. It's no longer about catching the scared boys. It's about hunting down an organized, unarmed gang. They decide to send out heavily armed search parties into the ranges with a new, aggressive mandate to find the Kellys and their associates and bring them back, dead or alive. The stage is being set for a confrontation. The four young men, hiding in their cold mountain fortress, know the police are coming. They aren't planning to run. They're planning a reception. The quiet war of whispers and warnings is about to become a loud war of gunpowder and lead. They're planning a reception, and the chosen venue is a secluded clearing deep in the bush at a place called Stringybark Creek. It's a place Ned knows well, a quiet spot surrounded by dense forest, offering perfect cover. The gang has been camped there for a few days, scanning for gold in the creek to pass the time. Their horses tethered nearby, their guns always within reach. They know the police are hunting them. The bush telegraph has been buzzing with news of 2 separate patrols combing the ranges. The gang's plan is simple and audacious. They won't run from the police. They'll ambush them. Their goal isn't necessarily to kill, but to capture the officers, disarm them, take their horses and weapons, and then humiliate them by sending them back to town on foot. It would be a major propaganda victory. On the 25th of October, Yoba Chiba, one of these police patrols, a party of 4, makes camp at a disused digger's hut near the gang's location. The group is led by Sergeant Michael Kennedy, a respected and experienced officer. With him are 3 constables, Thomas Lodigan, Michael Scanlon, and a man named Thomas McIntyre. They have no idea how close they are to their quarry. The next morning, Kennedy and Scanlon head off on patrol, leaving Lodigan and McIntyre to mind the camp. From their hiding spot on the high ground, the Kelly gang has been watching the police camp all along. Ned sees his opportunity. With Kennedy and Scanlon away, the camp is vulnerable. He decides to move in. He, Dan, Joe, and Steve creep down through the trees, their footsteps silent on the damp earth, until they surround the camp. Ned steps out from behind a tree, rifle in hand, and calls out the iconic words, "Bail up, throw up your hands." Constable McIntyre, who's unarmed and tending to the campfire, immediately surrenders. Constable Lonigan, however, makes a fatal mistake. H.E. is standing by a log, and as Ned shouts, Lonigan instinctively reaches for the revolver tucked in his belt. Ned doesn't hesitate. He fires. The shot rings out through the silent forest, and Lonigan falls dead. The mood instantly changes. The plan for a clean, non-violent capture has just gone horribly wrong. This is no longer a game of humiliation. It's a matter of life and death. They now have a terrified McIntyre as their prisoner and a dead policeman at their feet. Ned, pragmatic and cold, knows there's no turning back. He questions McIntyre, learning that Kennedy and Scanlon are due back at any moment. The gang takes up positions, hiding themselves again, and waits. Hours pass. The tension is unbearable. You can imagine McIntyre, sitting by the fire, forced to make small talk with the men who had just killed his colleague, knowing his own life hangs by a thread. As dusk begins to settle, Kennedy and Scanlon ride back into the clearing. McIntyre is ordered to call out to them to surrender. He does, and Scanlon, seeing the guns pointed at him, reaches for his own weapon. Another volley of shots erupts. Scanlon is killed instantly, falling from his horse. Sergeant Kennedy, showing incredible bravery, leaps from his horse, draws his revolver, and runs for cover behind a tree, exchanging fire with the gang. It's a desperate, one-man stand. He manages to wound Ned's arm before his own ammunition runs out. He then makes a run for it, trying to escape into the dense bush, but Ned pursues him. A final shot is fired. Sergeant Kennedy is killed. Only McIntyre is left alive. In the chaotic aftermath, as the gang tends to Ned's minor wound and gathers the police weapons and horses, McIntyre sees his chance. He spots an unattended police horse, makes a desperate dash for it, leaps into the saddle, and gallops away into the darkness, not stopping until he reaches the safety of Mansfield. The question of what exactly happened in those final moments with Sergeant Kennedy has been the subject of intense debate for over a century. The gang's version, told later by Ned, was that Kennedy was killed in the heat of battle, but McIntyre testified that he heard a final shot long after the main gunfight was over, implying that Ned had pursued the wounded sergeant and executed him. A strange, poignant detail that emerged later was that when Kennedy's body was found, his cloak had been placed under his head as a pillow, an act of respect that seems at odds with a cold-blood execution. Was it a final, compassionate gesture from Ned, or a detail invented later to soften the public image of a cop killer? We will likely never know for sure. The events at Stringy Bark Creek change everything. Ned Kelly and his gang are no longer just wanted for attempted murder based on the word of a dodgy constable. They are now, unequivocally, police killers. The colonial government is thrown into a panic. The public is shocked and horrified. The Kelly gang are declared outlaws by an act of parliament, meaning they can be shot on sight by anyone, citizen or police, with no need for a trial. The game has been raised to the highest possible stakes. Ned, Dan, Joe, and Steve are now hunted men in the truest sense of the word, with the entire weight of the British Empire's colonial forces bearing down on them. Their war has begun, and the first blood has been spilled. The first blood has been spilled, and it's police blood. The news from Stringy Bark Creek explodes across the colony of Victoria like a shockwave. It's one thing for a disgruntled selector to have a scuffle with a constable. It's another thing entirely for a gang of young men to systematically wipe out a police patrol. The government in Melbourne is not just embarrassed. They are terrified. They see this not as a simple crime, but as an open insurrection, a challenge to their very authority to rule. Their response is swift and draconian. Within days, the Felons Apprehension Act is rushed through Parliament. It's an archaic piece of legislation, a throwback to medieval times, that officially declares Edward Kelly, Daniel Kelly, Joseph Byrne, and Stephen Hart to be outlaws. This isn't just a legal term. It's a death sentence without a trial. It means that any citizen, not just the police, is legally empowered to shoot them on sight. It turns every man with a gun into a potential bounty hunter. The gang is stripped of all legal rights, reduced to the status of wolves to be hunted, and to encourage the hunt, the government puts up a reward. At first, it's a substantial but not astronomical sum. But as the weeks drag on and the gang remains at large, the number climbs higher and higher. The reward for the capture of the gang, dead or alive, eventually reaches an unprecedented £0. To put that in perspective, a skilled laborer at the time might earn £100 in a good year. £8,000 is a king's ransom. It's enough money to buy a massive farm, to set up a business, to leave the backbreaking poverty of selector life behind forever and live in comfort. This colossal sum of money changes the entire dynamic of the manhunt. It hangs in the air, a glittering temptation. It transforms the landscape of northeastern Victoria into a place of suspicion and paranoia. Every conversation you have with a neighbor now has a silent, unspoken question hanging over it. Would you sell them out for that much money? Could you trust your own cousin not to? The Bush Telegraph, once a reliable network of solidarity, is now potentially compromised. The law of £8 is a powerful poison, capable of dissolving bonds of friendship, community, and even family. The police flood the region with troopers, detectives, and spies. They set up watch posts, patrol the roads, and begin a systematic campaign of harassment against anyone suspected of being a Kelly sympathizer. This is where the war gets dirty. Dozens of people, men, women, even teenagers, are arrested and imprisoned without charge, held for months on end simply on the suspicion that they might have given the gang a meal or a place to sleep. They become known as the sympathizer prisoners. This tactic backfires spectacularly. Instead of breaking the network of support, it galvanizes it. It hardens the resolve of the selector community, proving to them that the government's war is not just on the Kelly gang, but on all of them. A strange and often overlooked aspect of this period is the role of the press. Newspapers in Melbourne, hungry for sensational stories, paint the gang as bloodthirsty monsters, inhuman devils, but the local country papers, closer to the sentiment on the ground, often tell a more nuanced story. They print letters from readers defending the Kellys, and they question the heavy-handed tactics of the police. The gang becomes a subject of intense public debate, a media phenomenon that fascinates and divides the entire country. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of the reward. Did it genuinely help the police by creating a network of informers? Or did it, by creating such an atmosphere of distrust, actually make it harder for them to gather reliable intelligence? What's certain is that it made life for the gang infinitely more dangerous. They couldn't trust anyone outside their most intimate circle. They had to assume that every stranger they met was weighing their life against a pile of gold. For you, living in the heart of Kelly country, the reward is a constant. Oppressive prisons. It's the talk of the pub, the whisper in the general store. You see the wanted posters nailed to the trees and the walls of the police station. Their faces staring out. The price tag printed in big, bold letters underneath. It creates a quiet, gripping fear. The region feels like it's under military occupation. The police are everywhere, armed and deadly. The sense of community, once your greatest strength, now feels fragile and vulnerable. The 8 £0 reward has turned your home into a hunting ground, and the quarry is for young men you've known your whole life. The government thinks money can solve their problem, but Ned Kelly has a different currency in mind: rebellion. And HES about to make a very public statement. Ned Kelly knows HES losing the propaganda war. In the Melbourne papers, HES a monster. To the government, HES a pest to be exterminated for a price. He needs to change the narrative. He needs to show the world that HES not just a common criminal hiding in the woods, but a revolutionary with a cause. He needs a stage. And in December 1878, just a couple of months after Stringy Bark Creek, he finds one in the quiet, unsuspecting town of Uruguay. The plan is brilliant in its audacity. It's not just a bank robbery. It's a piece of political theater. The gang doesn't just ride into town with guns blazing. They orchestrate a slow, meticulous takeover. The performance begins in the afternoon at a remote sheep station called Faithful S Creek, a few miles outside of Uruguay. The gang rides up to the station, not as terrifying outlaws, but almost as casual visitors. They calmly round up all the station hands and staff, about 24 people in total. There's no violence, no unnecessary threats. Instead, what unfolds is one of the most surreal episodes in Australian history. Ned, ever the charismatic leader, takes charge. He assures the terrified workers that no harm will come to them if they cooperate. He gets Joe Byrne, the most educated of the gang, to explain their motives. They talk about the injustice of his mother's imprisonment, the corruption of the police, and the plight of the poor selectors. It's less of a hostage situation and more of a compulsory political seminar. They spend the rest of the day and into the evening at the station. This is where the famous Kelly charm is on full display. They share food with their captives. Steve Howard, the showman, entertains them with impressive feats of horsemanship. Ned organizes games and even a small dance. It's utterly bizarre. He is simultaneously their captor and their host. HES trying to win them over, to convert them to his cause. A specific, and rather comical, detail is the encounter with a traveling hawker who happens to stumble upon the station. The gang captures him, but Ned, upon inspecting his wares, pays him for a new suit of clothes and some other goods he fancies. HES a bank robber who insists on paying for his haberdashery. It's this strange mix of criminality and a peculiar code of honor that so defines his public image. While this strange party is going on, Ned is gathering intelligence. He learns the layout of Uruguay, the location of the bank, then the name of the bank manager, a man named Robert Scott. The next day, the main event begins, leaving Dan and Steve to guard their guests at the station. Ned and Joe head into town. They don't go straight to the bank. They go to the bank manager's house, arriving just as the Scott family is sitting down to lunch. Again, the approach is disarmingly polite. They convince a servant they have important business, and once inside, they calmly announce that they are the Kelly gang and are there to rob the bank. They hold the manager, his wife, and their children captive in their own home. After a tense couple of hours, they escort the manager, his family, and his staff across the road to the National Bank. They force Scott to open the vault. Inside is more than £2 in cash, a small fortune. They stuff it into bags, but the performance isn't over. Before they leave, they need to ensure their escape. They ride to the telegraph office and cut the wires, severing the town's connection to the outside world. They are in complete control. They ride back to Faithful S Creek, gather Dan and Steve, and with a final, polite goodbye to their bewildered captives, they melt back into the bush, disappearing as mysteriously as they arrived. The aftermath is chaos for the police and a public relations triumph for the gang. When the news finally gets out, The colony is stunned, not just by the robbery, but by the manner in which it was conducted. There was no bloodshed. The hostages at the station reported that they were treated well, almost like guests. The story of the polite, well-spoken outlaws who held a party before robbing a bank is irresistible. It completely undermines the government's portrayal of them as mindless thugs. Historians often point to the Euro robbery as the moment the Kelly gang myth truly crystallizes. Was this a calculated performance designed to win public sympathy? Absolutely. Was it also a reflection of Ned's genuine belief in his own code of conduct? Probably. He saw himself as a gentleman rebel, a new breed of bushranger who fought with ideas as much as with bullets. He had successfully robbed a bank, embarrassed the police, and, most importantly, he had seized control of his own story. The boy from the bush had proven he was a master of strategy and spectacle, and he was just getting started. And with over £2,000 in the bank's money bags, he now had the resources to fuel his rebellion. But Ned knew that money, while useful, was the most valuable asset in his war against the establishment. The most valuable asset was public opinion. The Euro job was a masterstroke of public relations, and he immediately set about reinvesting his newfound celebrity status and cash into the one thing that could keep them alive: the sympathy and active support of the common people. The gang didn't just take the money and hide. They began to use it strategically. The cash from the Euro bank became a kind of informal stimulus package for the selector communities of northeastern Victoria. They didn't just throw coins to the poor in a grand, theatrical gesture. Their methods were more subtle, more integrated into the fabric of the community. A family on the verge of losing their selection because they couldn't make a payment might find an anonymous envelope with the exact amount they needed slipped under their door. A sympathetic public in whose business was struggling might be paid for supplies with a crisp banknote, with a generous keep the change on top. This was just charity. It was a calculated investment in their own security. Every pound they gave away bought them another layer of loyalty, another safe house, another pair of eyes and ears for the bush telegraph. You'd see the effects of it rippling through the district. A farmer suddenly has a new plow. A neighbor's wife has a new dress from the general store. No one asks where the money came from. They don't need to. They know, and their silence becomes a shield for the gang. The gang also leveraged their growing fame. They became folk heroes, rock stars of the bush. When they would secretly visit a sympathetic homestead, it was an event. They would share stories of their exploits, exaggerating for dramatic effect, making the police look like fools. Steve Hart and Dan Kelly, the younger, more boisterous members, would flirt with the local girls. Joe Byrne, the poet, would sometimes recite his verses, and Ed, the charismatic leader, would hold court, explaining his philosophy, justifying his actions, and listening to the grievances of the locals. He made them feel seen. He made them feel like their struggle was his struggle. A particularly fascinating and telling detail of this period is the creation of what historians have called a Republic of the Disaffected in northeastern Victoria. It was a state within a state, an area where the Queen's law meant less than Kelly's law. The gang and their sympathizers created their own social order. They settled disputes between neighbors. They punished those who were seen as police informers, often through nonviolent means like social ostracism or the accidental collapse of a fence, allowing cattle to wander. They were, in a very real sense, the unofficial government of the region. The police were powerless against this. They could arrest the sympathizers, but they couldn't arrest an entire community. Their informers were either too scared to talk or were fed a constant stream of false information. Patrols would be sent on wild goose chases, searching for the gang in one valley while they were being sheltered and fed in another. Miles away, the level of support was so deep that the gang could move around with a surprising degree of freedom, hiding in plain sight. The academic debate here focuses on the nature of this support. Was it born of genuine political solidarity with Ned's cause? Or was it driven by fear of the gang and the social pressure to conform? It was almost certainly a complex mix of both. Many genuinely saw Ned as a champion, a man brave enough to do what they only dared to dream of. Others were motivated by the money he spread around. And some, no doubt, helped the gang simply because they were terrified of what would happen to them if they didn't. But whatever the motivation, the result was the same: a human wall of protection around the four outlaws. They had built a network that was more efficient, more loyal, and more powerful than anything the official authorities could muster. The money from UOA was the seed, but the soil it was planted in was years of resentment and injustice. Ned was just buying loyalty. He was nurturing a rebellion that was already there, waiting for a leader. He had won the hearts and minds of his people. Now, he needed to give them a voice, a manifesto that would echo far beyond the confines of Kelly Country. He had won their hearts. Now he needed to win the argument. Ned Kelly understood that bullets and bank raids would only get him so far. To be seen as more than just a successful bandit, he needed to articulate his cause, to lay out his grievances in a way that couldn't be ignored. He needed to write it all down. The result is one of the most extraordinary documents in Australian history, the Jared Leary letter. This isn't some short, angry note. It's a sprawling, passionate, and often rambling manifesto, running to nearly 8,000 words. It's part autobiography, part political treatise, part declaration of war. And he didn't write it himself. The actual scribe was his loyal lieutenant, the literate Joe Byrne. You can picture them in a stuffy back room of a sympathizer's hut, Ned pacing back and forth, dictating in his rough, forceful brogue, while Joe painstakingly writes it all down, smoothing out the grammar but preserving the raw, fiery energy of Ned's voice. The letter is addressed to the members of the police force and the public. It begins with a blistering account of his own life story, starting with the persecution of his father, Red Kelly. He details every perceived injustice, every trumped-up charge, every act of police harassment he and his family have endured. He gives his side of the Stringy Bark Creek killings, portraying them as a clear case of self-defense against a police force that had come to murder him. He vehemently denies shooting Constable Fitzpatrick, painting the constable as a drunken liar whose actions lead to the unjust imprisonment of his mother. But the letter goes far beyond his personal story. It broadens its scope to condemn the entire colonial system. He rails against the corrupt police, the biased judiciary, and the wealthy squatters who he sees as the big, fat-necked, magpie-legged, leather-headed, stiff-necked, squattocratic tyrants. His command of invective is truly something to behold. He frames his struggle as a class war, a fight for the poor Irish selectors against their English oppressors. He even delves into Irish history, drawing parallels between his fight and the centuries of Irish rebellion against British rule. He is claiming a political and historical legitimacy for his actions. The tone of the letter is a whirlwind of emotions. It shifts from righteous anger to sarcastic wit, from self-pity to defiant pride. At times, he sounds like a wronged man pleading for justice. At other times, he sounds like a revolutionary general issuing a final ultimatum. He warns that if the persecution of his people and his family doesn't stop, he will be forced to make an end of it on a wholesale scale. It's a chilling threat, a promise of greater violence to come. One of the most fascinating and peculiar aspects of the Jared Leary letter is its style. It's written in a unique, stream of consciousness vernacular that's completely captivating. The language is raw, powerful, and poetic in its own rough way. It's filled with vivid imagery and memorable phrases. It's the authentic voice of the bush, unpolished and unfiltered. For this reason, some literary critics have hailed it as a foundational document of Australian literature, a kind of national epic from the wrong side of the tracks. The great historical debate surrounding the letter is about its authorship and intent. How much of it is Ned's pure voice, and how much is Joe Byrne's refined interpretation? Most historians agree that the sentiments, the stories, and the raw emotion are all Ned's, while Joe acted as a skilled editor and amanuensis. And what was its ultimate purpose? Was it a genuine attempt to explain himself and win public support? Or was it a final, defiant roar from a man who knew he was doomed? A last testament to be left for posterity. Ned's plan was just to write the letter. He wanted it published. He wanted it printed in the newspapers for everyone to read, but he knew no editor would dare to print such an inflammatory document. So, he devised a plan to force the issue. He would take over another town, rob another bank, and find a local newspaper editor to publish his manifesto at gunpoint. The target was chosen. A small, sleepy town in the middle of the flat riverine plains of New South Wales. Gerard Larry. The letter was now written. The next step was to deliver it. The letter was written. The next step was to deliver it. And the chosen postman was Ned Kelly himself, with his gang as his armed escort. In February 1879, they ride out of the Victorian Ranges and cross the Murray River into the neighboring colony of New South Wales. Their destination is Gerard Larry, a quiet, prosperous little town dozing in the summer heat. It's a bold move, taking their operations into a new jurisdiction, a place where the police might be less prepared for their unique brand of theatrical crime. Their arrival in town on a Saturday night is a masterpiece of deception. They don't ride in like bandits. They ride in pretending to be police reinforcements, a special patrol from out of town. They ride straight to the police barracks. There are only 2 officers stationed in the town, Constable Richards and Constable Devine. The gang, dressed in a mix of stolen police items and civilian clothes, knock on the door and spin a tale about needing a place to stay for the night while they hunt for the notorious Skellig gang. The 2 unsuspecting constables welcome them in. It's only when they are inside that Ned reveals their true identity. The 2 policemen are stunned into submission without a single shot being fired. Richards and Devine are locked in their own cells. The gang now has control of the police station, the town's entire law enforcement capability, and they haven't even woken up the neighbors. As a final touch of humiliation, Ned has the senior constable's wife, Mrs. Devine, cook them all a hearty dinner. For the next 2 days, the Kelly gang owns Gerard Larry. It's Uruguay all over again, but on a grander and more audacious scale. They move around the town with impunity. They stroll down the main street, chatting with locals, many of whom have no idea who they are. Joe Byrne and Steve Hart spend a good deal of time in the local pub, drinking with the townspeople, paying for rounds with money they haven't even stolen yet, and subtly gathering information. A wonderfully bizarre detail from the Gerard Larry raid is what Ned did with the police uniforms. He and Steve Hart actually put on the uniforms of the captured constables and walked around town, a surreal piece of performance art. At one point, Ned, dressed as a policeman, even helps a local resident with a small task, all the while knowing he is about to rob the town blind. It's this kind of brazen, theatrical nerve that elevates their crimes from simple robbery to folklore. On Monday morning, the real business begins. Part of the gang marches the captured policemen to the Royal Mail Hotel, which is next door to the Bank of New South Wales. They round up the staff and patrons, turning the hotel into a makeshift holding pen. Then, Ned and Joe walk into the bank. The robbery itself is almost an afterthought, a simple matter of forcing the clerk to open the safe. They walk out with another 2 £0, but for Ned, the money is secondary. His primary mission is to get his letter published. He seeks out the town's newspaper editor, a man named Samuel Gill. He finds him, hands him the thick sheaf of papers, his life story and manifesto, and orders him to print it. Gill, terrified but also a newspaper man smelling the story of a lifetime, agrees. However, in the confusion of the raid, Gill manages to hide the manuscript. And Ned, with so much else to manage, doesn't follow up to ensure the job is done. He mistakenly believes he has accomplished his goal. Before leaving town, Ned delivers one final, fiery performance. He gathers the crowd of hostages in the hotel and gives them an impromptu speech, a live-action version of his letter. He rails against the police, the government, and the squatters. He justifies the killings at Stringy Bark Creek. He offers to debate any man present on the justice of his cause. No one takes him up on the offer. Then, after cutting the telegraph wires, just as they did in Uruguay, the gang rides calmly out of town, disappearing back towards the Victorian border. The Gerard Larry raid is an even greater success than Uruguay. They have again humiliated the police, secured a massive haul of cash, and done so without spilling a drop of blood. They are now legends on both sides of the Murray River. But there's a crucial failure amidst the triumph: the Jared Leary letter. The very reason for the raid remains unpublished. Samuel Gill, once the gang is safely gone, wisely hands the dangerous document over to the authorities. Ned's great manifesto, his passionate justification for his war, is suppressed. It will not be seen by the public for another 50 years. He has shouted his truth, but the world has not been allowed to hear it. He has shouted his truth, but it's been swallowed by the silence of official suppression. The Jared Leary raid solidifies the gang's legendary status, but it also lights a fire under the police forces of two colonies. The embarrassment is now doubled. The pressure to capture the gang becomes immense. The government, realizing their own men are outclassed in the bush, decides to fight fire with fire. They turn to a group of men whose skills in the wilderness are second to none: the Aboriginal trackers. This introduces a new, complex, and often tragic element to the story. The police recruit a team of black trackers as they work on the sentencing called from Queensland. These men are not just random recruits. They are highly skilled specialists, men whose understanding of the land is almost supernatural to the European settlers. They can read a landscape like a book. A broken twig, a disturbed stone, a faint scuff mark on the ground that a white policeman wouldn't even notice. To them, it's a sentence, a paragraph, telling them who passed by, how many, how fast they were moving, and how long ago. Their arrival in Kelly country changes the game entirely. For the first time, the gang's greatest advantage, their mastery of the bush, is challenged. Ned, Dan, Jill, and Steve can no longer assume that melting into the forest means they are safe. They are now being hunted by men who can follow their trail with relentless, almost magical precision. The gang's reaction to this is one of genuine fear and, it must be said, ugly racism. In the Jared Leary letter, Ned rails against the trackers, calling them black devils and threatening to wipe them out. He sees their involvement not as a fair fight, but as a foul tactic, a betrayal by the land itself. The dynamic between the trackers and the police is a story in itself. The white officers, like Superintendent Francis Hare, who was put in charge of the hunt, are completely dependent on the trackers' skills, yet they often treat them with a mixture of awe and contempt. They don't understand their methods. They can barely communicate with them, and they hold them at a social distance. You can imagine the scene. A group of uniformed, sweating policemen, crashing clumsily through the undergrowth, being led by a small group of silent, observant Aboriginal men who move with a grace and economy the white men can only envy. A strange and little-known detail is the tracker's own perspective, which is almost entirely absent from the historical record. What did they think of this whole affair? They were, in essence, mercenaries caught in a white man's war. They were tracking down a gang of Irish rebels on behalf of an English colonial authority that had stolen their own land and decimated their own people. The ironies are staggering. Historians continue to debate their motivations. Were they simply doing a job for pay? Did they have their own loyalties and animosities? Or were they playing a longer, more subtle game? Their true thoughts hidden behind a mask of professional inscrutability. The trackers almost succeed on several occasions. Their presence forces the gang to change their tactics. They can no longer afford to be careless. They have to stick to rocky ground where their tracks are harder to follow. They have to cross streams to break the scent for the trackers' dogs. They have to become even more phantom-like, even more reliant on their network of sympathizers to hide them in barns and huts where the trackers can't follow. The hunt becomes a tense cat and mouse game played out across hundreds of square miles of rugged terrain. The police, led by the trackers, will find a campsite only hours after the gang has abandoned it. The campfire's still warm. They'll find the tracks leading to a sympathizer's farm, only to be met with a wall of denial, the gang having already been spirited away to another location. The trackers are brilliant, but they are only as good as the police force they serve. The slow, bureaucratic nature of the police command, and the deep, unwavering support for the gang and the local community prove to be obstacles that even the tracker's incredible skills cannot always overcome. For you, in the selector community, the arrival of the trackers is a terrifying development. They represent a threat of a different order. You watch them from a distance, these mysterious men from the north, and you see the very soul of the bush being turned against your heroes. The fight is no longer just against the clumsy, blue-uniformed troopers. It's against something deeper, older, and far more dangerous. The net is tightening. The world is shrinking for the Kelly gang. The net is tightening, and the world is shrinking. After the Joradleri raid, a strange and deceptive quiet falls over Kelly country. For more than a year, from early 1879 to the middle of 1880, the Kelly gang seems to vanish off the face of the earth. The sensational newspaper headlines fade. The police patrols continue their fruitless searches. But the trail has gone cold. To the public and the authorities in Melbourne, it seems the outlaws might have fled the colony, or perhaps are just lying low, waiting for the heat to die down. But they haven't gone anywhere. This period, often called the Year of Silence, is one of the most mysterious and crucial phases of the entire saga. The gang is hiding in plain sight. Thanks to the incredible depth and organization of their sympathizer network, they are not living in a single cave in the mountains. They are moving constantly between a dozen or more safe houses, the huts, barns, and shearing sheds of the selectors who have pledged their loyalty. They are living a strange, subterranean existence, emerging only at night. Their lives dictated by the rhythm of the bush telegraph. You are a part of this silence. It's a conspiracy of the entire community. You might see one of the boys at a distance, herding cattle for a friendly farmer. You might hear that they attended a local dance, heavily disguised, slipping in on doubt before anyone official could be alerted. The code of silence is absolute. To speak of seeing them is to betray not just the gang, a betrayal that could have deadly consequences, but to betray your entire community. Life for the gang during this time is a mixture of profound boredom and constant, nerve-shedding tension. They pass the time playing cards, helping with farm chores, and planning their next move, but they can never truly relax. Every approaching horse, every barking dog, could signal the arrival of the police. They are living like ghosts in their own homeland, unable to live freely, but unwilling to surrender. This long hiatus is not just a period of hiding. It's a period of intense planning and preparation. Ned Kelly is not idle. His mind is working, turning over a new, far more ambitious plan. The bank robberies were just a prelude. He is now thinking on a grander scale. He is no longer content with just embarrassing the police. He wants to strike a decisive blow. He wants to ignite a full-scale rebellion. He envisions a republic of northeastern Victoria, with himself as its leader. He dreams of rallying the hundreds of angry selectors, arming them, and declaring independence from the crown. It's during this year of silence that the most iconic element of the Kelly legend begins to take shape. In secret, in secluded bush workshops, with the help of sympathetic blacksmiths, the gang begins to construct their famous suits of armor. This is a truly bizarre and brilliant piece of lateral thinking. They know they are outgunned by the police, who are now armed with modern, rapid-fire rifles, to stand any chance in a direct confrontation. They need protection. The armor is not made from pristine steel plates. It's fashioned from the mold boards of stolen plows, heavy, curved pieces of iron used for turning soil. A plow is a symbol of the selector's life. The two love their honest, back-breaking labor. The act of turning these tools into weapons of war is thick with symbolism. It's as if they are literally weaponizing their own hardship. The work is slow and difficult, heating the thick iron in a makeshift forge, hammering it into the rough shape of breastplates, backplates, and cylindrical helmets. It takes months of clandestine effort. The finished suits are incredibly heavy, weighing nearly 100 pounds each. They are clumsy, restrictive, and offer no protection for the arms or legs, but they are bulletproof against police revolvers and shotguns at a distance. They are designed for one purpose: to allow the wearer to walk, invulnerable, into a hail of gunfire. The historical debate here centers on Ned's state of mind. Was this plan for a Republican the creation of armor the work of a brilliant, if desperate, revolutionary strategist? Or was it the sign of a man losing his grip on reality, succumbing to delusions of grandeur after a year spent in hiding? The truth is likely that desperation and brilliance were walking hand in hand. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane, but it was also born of a cold, hard assessment of his options. He knew he couldn't run forever. The hunt would never stop. His only way out was to escalate, to force a final, decisive confrontation on his own terms. The year of silence was the deep breath before the plunge. The armor was being forged. The final act was being written, and it would require a sacrifice. The final act was being written, and like all great tragedies, it required a betrayal. The gang's survival for so long had depended on the absolute loyalty of their network. But the combination of police pressure, the enormous reward, and the simple, grinding fear of being associated with the outlaws was beginning to create cracks in the wall of silence. The weak link, the man who would ultimately set the final confrontation in motion, was a childhood friend of Joe Burns named Aaron Sherritt. Aaron Sherritt is one of the most complex and tragic figures in the Kelly story. He grew up with Joe in the Wolst Valley, a wild, secluded area known for its gold diggings and its tight-knit community. They were best friends, inseparable. Aaron was even engaged to be married to Joe's sister. He was deep inside the Kelly circle, privy to their secrets, their movements, and their plans. He was one of them. But Aaron was also ambitious, and perhaps a little weak-willed. He found himself caught in an impossible position. The police, led by the shrewd and relentless Superintendent Hare, identified him as a potential informant. They began to lean on him, using a combination of threats and promises. They likely threatened him with imprisonment for his own minor crimes and for his known association with the gang. And they dangled the glittering prize of reward money and a fresh start somewhere new. You could imagine the agonizing pressure on the man. On one side, he has his best friend, his fiancée, and his entire community, to whom he owes a lifetime of loyalty. On the other, he has the full weight of the law and the promise of a life free from poverty and fear. For months, Aaron plays a dangerous double game. He becomes a police spy, feeding them information. But the information he provides is often deliberately vague, misleading, or out of date. He tries to protect his friends while appearing to cooperate with the police. It's a tightrope walk that can't last. The gang, especially the versus Pico's Ned Kelly, begins to have its doubts about Aaron. Joe Bear, torn between his loyalty to his friend and the mounting evidence, fiercely defends him at first, but the signs become undeniable. A police raid happens a little too close to a known hideout. A piece of information that only Aaron knew seems to have reached the ears of Superintendent Hare. The Bush Telegraph starts to hum with a new, ugly word, traitor. The specific detail that likely sealed Aaron's fate was his close association with the police patrols. He was often seen guiding them through the bush, ostensibly leading them on false trails, but to the paranoid and increasingly desperate gang, the sight of their trusted friend leading their sworn enemies was the ultimate betrayal. The fact that the police had established a permanent watch post, a small hut full of officers, right next to Aaron's own mother's house, was the final confirmation. He was living under police protection. He had chosen his side. Historians are still divided on Aaron Sherritt's true motivations. Was he a cold-hearted traitor from the start, motivated purely by greed? Was he a terrified young man who was blackmailed into betraying his friends? Or was he, as some have argued, a flawed but ultimately tragic figure who was trying to play both sides to protect everyone? A game that was doomed to fail. His story is a powerful reminder of the immense pressure the Kelly hunt placed on ordinary people, forcing them into impossible choices. For Ned Kelly, the equation was simple. Aaron Sherritt was a rat. He had broken the sacred code of the bush, the code of loyalty, and he was not just a passive threat. He was an active danger. He knew their plans. He knew about the armor. He knew about the grand scheme for a final confrontation. He had to be silenced. The decision is made. Aaron Sherritt must die. His death is not just an act of revenge. It is a strategic necessity. It is to be the first move in their final, desperate plan. It is the trigger event designed to lure the police exactly where the gang wants them. The betrayal of a friend would now be answered with a calculated act of murder, an act designed to set the entire country on fire. The long, quiet year was over. The violence was about to begin again, more personal and more brutal than ever before. The violence was about to begin again, and it would be fueled by a potent mixture of vengeance and a desperate, audacious strategy. But first, the most crucial piece of their plan needed to be completed. The armor. For months, it has been a secret project, a rumor whispered on the bush telegraph. Now, in the days leading up to their final stand, the work becomes frantic. You have to imagine the scene. A secluded gully, deep in the ranges, or the back room of a sympathetic blacksmith's forge. The air thick with the smell of hot metal and coal smoke. The work is done under the cover of darkness. The rhythmic clang of hammer on iron muffled as best as possible. The raw material is the key. The heavy, cast iron mold boards from plows. These aren't just any pieces of metal. They are a direct link to the land and the life the selectors felt was being stolen from them. There's a powerful, almost poetic, symbolism in taking the very instrument of their toil and turning it into a shield against the authorities. The process is brutal, primitive engineering. The thick, curved plates have to be heated in a roaring forge until they glow a cherry red. Then, they are manhandled onto an anvil, perhaps a large, flat-bed boulder, and beaten into shape. This isn't the work of a master armorer creating a knight's shining suit. It's rough, punishing labor. They are hammering the iron into crude breastplates and backplates, shaped to cover the torso. The pieces are connected with leather straps or chunky, hand-forged bolts. The helmets are the most haunting and bizarre element. They are not elegant, visor-red helms. They are cylindrical buckets of iron, with a single, narrow slit cut out for vision, to where one would be to be plunged into a dark, echoing, claustrophobic world. Your hearing would be muffled, your peripheral vision gone. You would be looking at the world through a mail slot, your own breathing loud and dragged in your ears. They are less like helmets and more like iron coffins for the head. Each of the 4 gang members has a suit, but they are not identical. Ned's is the heaviest and most complete, weighing in at a staggering 44 kilograms, or 97 pounds. His includes a front plate, a back plate, a helmet, and even a protective apron that hangs down to his thighs. The other suits are slightly lighter and less comprehensive. This variation has led historians to speculate. Was Ned's suit more robust because he, as the leader, expected to be the primary target, or did they simply run out of time or suitable materials for the others? A fascinating, and often debated, technical detail is how they tested the armor's effectiveness. The legend, likely true, is that they would prop the finished plates against a log and fire their own guns at them from a set distance. You can picture the scene, the sharp crack of a rifle echoing through the trees, followed by the dull thud of the bullet striking the iron. They needed to be sure. Their lives would depend on the quality of their own crude handiwork. They found that the armor could indeed stop a lead bullet from the Martini Henry rifles the police used, though the impact would still be staggering, capable of knocking a man off his feet and leaving a massive bruise. The sheer physical feat of wearing this armor is hard to comprehend. Imagine strapping nearly 100 pounds of jacket, ill-fitting iron onto your body. Movement would be slow and clumsy. To fall over would be to become like an overturned turtle, struggling to right yourself, to fight in it, to run in it, to aim and fire a rifle while encased in it, would be a monumental challenge. It was not a suit for a nimble guerrilla fighter. It was a suit for a walking tank, a juggernaut designed to absorb punishment and keep moving forward. This act of creation is the ultimate expression of the gang's mindset. It's a rejection of the rules of engagement. They know they cannot win a conventional firefight, so they have changed the nature of the fight itself. They have made themselves into something not quite human, something from a dark fairy tale. Ironclad demons rising from the bush. The armor is a physical manifestation of Ned's defiance. He has been cornered, hunted, and betrayed. His response is not to flee, but to encase himself in steel and walk directly into the fire. The suits are finished. The plan is ready. The first step is the execution of the traitor. Aaron should. The second step is to use that event to lure a train full of police into a deadly trap. The suits are finished. The plan is ready, and it is a plan of breathtaking audacity. A piece of strategic thinking so extreme it borders on madness. This is not going to be another hit-and-run bank robbery. This is intended to be the grand finale, the climax of their war against the colony of Victoria. Ned's vision has gone far beyond simple revenge. He is aiming for a revolution. The plan has several, intricately linked stages, a chain of events designed to culminate in a single, cataclysmic moment. Step 1. The trigger. As you know, this is the elimination of the traitor. Aaron showed on Saturday, June 26th. Yobabading. Joe Byrne and Dan Kelly ride to Sheraton's hut near the Wolst Valley. Their mission is not just to kill him, but do it in a way that creates maximum panic and guarantees a specific police response. They force a neighbor to lure Aaron to the door, and when he appears, Joe Byrne shoots him dead in front of his wife and the 4 police officers who were supposed to be protecting him. The police, terrified and outgunned, cower inside the hut and do not emerge for hours. The news of a police informant being murdered right under the noses of his protectors will, Ned calculates, send the authorities in Melbourne into a frenzy. Step 2. The lure. Ned knows exactly how the police will react. They will dispatch a special train from Melbourne, packed with troopers, officers, and a full complement of those dreaded Queensland trackers. Their destination will be Beechworth, the main town near the scene of the crime. This train is the centerpiece of Ned's entire plan. It is the fish he intends to catch. Step 3. The trap. While Joe and Dan are dealing with Sheriff, Ned and Steve Hart ride to the small railway siding of Glenrowan. Glenrowan is a tiny settlement, barely a town, consisting of a train station, a tub, a few houses, and not much else, but it has a crucial feature. The railway line runs through a deep cutting with a sharp, dangerous curve just before the station. It's a perfect spot for a derailment. Under the cover of darkness, Ned and Steve forced the local railway workers to help them. They use tools to tear up a section of the track on this treacherous bend. Their intention is to send the entire police train, moving at speed, crushing into the gully. It's a plan for mass slaughter, a chilling, and often debated point among historians is the sheer ruthlessness of this plan. The train wouldn't just be carrying police. It would likely have civilian crew. A driver, a fireman, a guard was Ned, who had previously taken such pains to avoid innocent bloodshed, now prepared to kill indiscriminately to achieve his goals. The evidence suggests yes, his mindset had hardened. He was no longer a gentleman rebel. He was a general in a war of his own making, and he was willing to accept collateral damage. Step 4. The revolution. This is where the plan elevates from a simple ambush to a revolutionary fantasy. After the train crashes, the gang, clad in their invincible armor, will emerge from the darkness. They will deal with any surviving policemen. They will be armed not just with their own guns, but with the entire arsenal from the wrecked train. Then, Ned planned to ride to the nearby towns of Benalla and Wangaratta. He would blow up the bridges, cut the telegraph lines, and effectively isolate the entire region. He believed this dramatic victory would be the signal for a general uprising. Hundreds of sympathizers, the members of his Republic of the Disaffected, would rise up, armed and ready to join him. They would seize control of northeastern Victoria. It would be the birth of a new nation, forged in the fire of a wrecked train. It's a plan that is simultaneously brilliant and utterly delusional. It relies on a perfect sequence of events. It relies on the police reacting exactly as predicted. And most of all, it relies on the romantic notion that hundreds of poor, downtrodden farmers would be willing to risk their lives and families in open, armed rebellion against the full might of the British Empire. With the track turned up, the trap is set. Ned and the gang now need a place to wait. They choose the most prominent building in the tiny settlement, the Glenrowan Inn, a wooden pub run by a woman named Ann Jones. They ride up to the inn and take everyone inside hostage. The landlady, her family, some local residents, and a few travelers. The inn becomes their command center. They are calm, confident. They settle in for the night, drinking with their captives, explaining their grand plan, waiting for the whistle of the approaching train that will signal the start of their revolution. The stage is set, the actors are in place, but the play is about to take an unexpected turn. The stage is set, the actors are in place, but a key player has missed his cue. The plan hinges on the police train arriving on schedule and speeding blindly into the trap, put back at Aaron Sheridan's hut. The 4 terrified policemen have remained hidden for hours, delaying the news of the murder from reaching their superiors. This throws Ned's meticulous timetable into disarray. The special police train, the instrument of his grand design, is delayed. Inside the Glenrowan Inn, the atmosphere grows stranger as the hours drag on. What was supposed to be a short, tense wait turns into a long, drawn-out siege party. The gang, trying to keep their 60-odd hostages calm, encourages drinking, dancing, and games. Steve Hart, ever the performer, gets drunk and puts on a display of show riding in the hotel yard. Joe Byrne, also drinking heavily, joins in the morbid festivities. Only Ned seems to remain focused, pacing, watching, waiting for the sound of the train. But as the night wears on, a new, unforeseen variable comes into play. One of the hostages is the local schoolmaster, a man named Thomas Curnow. He is a quiet, intelligent man, and as he listens to the drunken boasts of the gang, he understands the full, horrifying scope of their plan. He realizes that dozens of lives are at stake on that train. He feigns sympathy, plays along with the festivities, and earns Ned's trust late into the night, convincing Ned that he needs to get his wife and child home. Curnow is given permission to leave. It's a critical mistake on Ned's part, a rare lapse in his judgment, perhaps clouded by fatigue and frustration. Curnow doesn't go home. He grabs a candle and a red scarf and runs down the railway line into the darkness, in the direction of the approaching train. He runs for over a mile, his heart pounding, until he hears the distant rumble. He stands in the middle of the tracks, waving his makeshift lantern, a lone figure against the night. The train driver sees the frantic warning light, slams on the brakes, and brings the heavy train screeching to a halt just a few hundred yards from the sabotage track. Thomas Curnow, the unassuming schoolmaster, has single-handedly averted a catastrophe and doomed the Kelly gang's revolution before it even began. The police, led by Superintendent Hare, disembark from the train. They are confused at first, but Curnow quickly explains the situation. They know the gang is in the town, likely at the inn. They advance cautiously, surrounding the flimsy wooden building. A stray shot is fired. Who fired first is, of course, a point of endless historical debate, and the siege of Glenrowan begins. The inn, once a common center, is instantly transformed into a death trap. A furious volley of fire erupts from the police, who take cover behind trees, logs, and the railway embankment. Bullets ripped through the thin wooden walls of the pub. The hostages, caught in the crossfire, scream and drop to the floor. The scene inside is pure chaos and terror. In the initial hail of gunfire, Joe Byrne, standing at the bar having a drink, is shot in the groin and bleeds to death within minutes. The gang's potent strategist is the first to fall. Ned, Dan, and Steve scramble to put on their heavy, clumsy armor. They return fire, the sound of their guns mixing with the splintering of wooden, the cries of the wounded hostages inside. The police are bewildered by the strange, metallic clang of their bullets hitting the outlaws. They can't understand why their shots are having no effect. As the night drags on, the firing becomes sporadic. Ned Kelly, realizing their plan has failed and they are hopelessly trapped, makes a daring decision. Under the cover of darkness and confusion, he slips out of the back of the inn. He is not abandoning his friends. His idea is to circle around behind the police line, to attack them from the rear and create a diversion that might allow the others to escape. But in the darkness and the chaos of the gunfight, he is wounded and becomes disoriented. He disappears into the bush behind the inn, leaving Dan and Steve, now leaderless, to face the siege alone. The long night of terror at the Glenrowan Inn is far from over. The long night of terror at the Glenrowan Inn is far from over. But the dawn is coming, and with it, one of the most surreal and iconic moments in all of Australian history. As the first grey light of morning filters through the smoke-filled air on Monday, June 28th, the police, who have been firing at the silent, darkened inn for hours, are startled by a sound from behind them. From the bush, it's a strange, metallic clanking, accompanied by a defiant voice. A figure emerges from the morning mist and the gun smoke. It doesn't look human. It's tall, bulky, and encased in dark, cylindrical iron. A helmet that looks like a tin can with a narrow slit for eyes conceals its face. It walks with a slow, deliberate, almost robotic gait, a long coat covering its armored torso. In one hand, it holds a revolver. It looks like a monster, a golem, a creature from a nightmare. It is, of course, Ned Kelly, returned from the bush to make his last stand. He walks directly towards the police line, firing his revolver. The police, stunned and terrified by this apparition, unleash a fusillade of fire at him. The bullets whine and ricochet off his iron armor with loud, ringing clangs. He stumbles when hit, but he keeps coming. "You can't hurt me," he roars. "I am made of iron." For a moment, the police believe it. Some later said they thought it was a supernatural being, a being from folklore. This is the image that will be seared into the national consciousness. The lone, armored figure, silhouetted against the dawn, walking invincibly into a storm of bullets. It is an act of supreme, almost suicidal, bravery. He is trying to draw the police fire away from the inn, to give his brother and Steve Hart a chance. He circles the inn, a walking, clanking target, exchanging fire with dozens of policemen. But the armor, for all its ingenuity, has a fatal flaw. It protects his head and torso, but his arms, hands, and legs are completely exposed. The police, recovering from their initial shock, begin to realize this. Sergeant Arthur Steele, a brave and determined officer, circles around and takes careful aim, not at the invulnerable iron chest, but at Kelly's unprotected legs. He fires his shotgun. A blast tears into Ned's hips and thighs. The Iron Man cries out in pain and collapses to the ground. The fight is over. The police rush forward and surround the fallen giant. They pull the heavy, bucket-like helmet from his head, revealing the bleeding, defiant face of Ned Kelly. He is alive, but severely wounded. They strip the rest of the heavy, blood-stained armor from his body. As they tend to his wounds, he is reported to have muttered the famous, enigmatic phrase that has puzzled historians ever since. "Ah, well, I suppose it has come to this." Or, according to other accounts, such as life, it's a line of stoic, almost philosophical, resignation, a recognition that the Great Rebellion, the grand plan, has ended here, in the dirt and mud behind a country pub. Meanwhile, the siege at the inn continues. Dan Kelly and Steve Hart are still inside. Along with the remaining hostages, the police, emboldened by the capture of the leader, call for them to surrender, but they are met with only silence or defiant gunfire. The hours drag on. Finally, late in the afternoon, the authorities lose patience. They decide to end it by fire. They set the wooden building alight. As the flames engulf the inn, the last of the terrified hostages manage to escape. But Dan and Steve do not emerge. The fire rages, and the roof eventually collapses in a shower of sparks and smoke. After the inferno dies down, police enter the smoldering ruins. They find the charred bodies of Dan Kelly and Steve Hart. The exact circumstances of their deaths are one of the great, unresolved mysteries of the Kelly story. Did they die from police bullets? Were they killed by the fire? Or, as many believe, did they take their own lives? A final pact to avoid being captured and hanged. The evidence was too badly burned to be certain, but the Kelly gang was no more. The rebellion was over. Only the leader was left, captured and broken, to face the justice he had so long defied. The rebellion was over. The smoke has cleared from Glenrowan, leaving behind the smoldering ruins of the inn and the ghosts of 3 young men. But the story isn't finished. The final act will not be played out with guns and armor, but with wigs and gables, in the cold, formal theater of a courtroom. The captured and broken leader must now face the system he fought against, not as a warrior, but as a prisoner. Ned, weak from his wounds, is transported to Melbourne. The journey itself is a spectacle. Crowds gather at every station to catch a glimpse of the infamous Outlaw, the man in the iron mask. He is taken to the hospital wing of the Melbourne Gaol, the same grim, stone fortress where his mother is still serving her sentence. For weeks, he lies there, recovering from the multiple gunshot wounds to his arms and legs, his life hanging in the balance. The authorities are desperate to keep him alive. They don't want him to be a martyr who died of his wounds. They want to make an example of him. They want a trial. And what a trial it is. It's the trial of the century for the young colony of Victoria. The public is captivated. Newspapers report every detail. When he is finally well enough to stand, Ned is brought before the court. The preliminary hearing is a formality. The real drama begins when he is committed to stand trial for the willful murder of Constable Thomas Lonergan at Stringy Bark Creek. The choice of this specific charge is a shrewd legal maneuver by the prosecution. The events at Glenrowan were messy, a chaotic siege where it would be hard to prove who fired the fatal shots. But Stringy Bark Creek was different. The testimony of the sole police survivor, Constable McIntyre, was clear. He would point the finger directly at Ned Kelly. The trial takes place in the grand, imposing Supreme Court of Victoria. You can picture the scene. The dark wood paneling, the high ceilings, the public galleries packed with journalists, society ladies, and curious onlookers. And in the center of it all, in the prisoner's dock, is Ned Kelly, HES, no longer the terrifying Iron Man of Glenrowan. HES, a pale, gaunt figure in a simple suit, his arm in a sling, his defiant eyes scanning the faces of the men who hold his life in their hands. The judge presiding over the case is Sir Redmond Barry. This is a detail so perfectly, tragically ironic it almost feels scripted. Judge Barry is the very same judge who, 2 years earlier, had sentenced Ned's mother, Dylan, to 3 years of hard labor for her alleged role in the Fitzpatrick incident. He was the judge who had told her that if her son Ned were present, he would receive a sentence of 15 years. The man who would decide Ned's fate was the very embodiment of the judicial system Ned believed was corrupt and biased against him and his class. From the moment Judge Barry was assigned the case, the outcome was, in Ned's mind, a foregone conclusion. The trial itself is surprisingly brief. The prosecution lays out its case, centered on McIntyre's eyewitness account. Ned's court-appointed lawyer does his best, attempting to argue that his client was the victim of police persecution and that he acted in self-defense. But he is forbidden by the judge from bringing up the long history of grievances, the Fitzpatrick incident, or the imprisonment of Ellen Kelly. Judge Barry rules that these are irrelevant to the specific charge of murdering Constable Lonergan. Ned, frustrated with his lawyer's inability to tell his full story, frequently interrupts the proceedings. He tries to speak, to give his own account, but he is constantly silenced by the judge. The legal machine grinds on, deaf to his pleas for context. The historical debate here is whether Ned received a fair trial by the standards of the day. Legally, perhaps he did. The evidence for the specific charge was strong, but was it just? By stripping the events of all context, the court ensured that Ned Kelly, the social rebel, would not be tried. Only Ned Kelly, the police killer, would. Finally, the jury retires. They are out for only a short time. They return with the inevitable verdict. Guilty. The clerk asks Ned if he has anything to say before the sentence is passed. And now, finally, he is allowed to speak. He launches into a long, passionate, and defiant speech, condemning the judge, the jury, And the police. He knows he is a dead man, and he has nothing left to lose. Judge Barry listens impassively and then performs the final, solemn ritual. He dons the black cap and sentences Edward Kelly to be hanged by the neck until he is dead. After passing the sentence, Judge Barry utters the customary closing words. May God have mercy on your soul. Ned Kelly, standing tall in the dock, looks the judge directly in the eye and delivers his own final, chilling verdict. I will go a little further than that, and say I will see you there where I go. I will see you there where I go. The words hang in the silent courtroom. The final, defiant curse hurled at the very man who has condemned him. The trial is over. The sentence has been passed. All that remains is the slow, inexorable march towards the gallows. Ned is taken from the courthouse and returned to the cold stone embrace of the old Malvern Gaol. He is placed on death row, in a cell just a short walk from the beam and trapdoor, where he will meet his end. The final days of his life are a strange mixture of quiet reflection and public frenzy. Outside the prison walls, the colony is in an uproar. The sentence has galvanized both his supporters and his detractors. A massive public campaign for a reprieve begins. Petitions are circulated, gathering tens of thousands of signatures. Public meetings are held, with speakers passionately arguing that while Kelly was a criminal, the death sentence was too harsh, especially given the mitigating circumstances of police persecution that the court refused to hear. His supporters see him as a political prisoner, a martyr for the cause of the common man. They argue that hanging him will only inflame the social tensions he came to represent. They believe he is a brave rebel, a product of an unjust system. His enemies, on the other hand, demand his execution. They see him as a cold-blooded murderer of police officers, a terrorist who threatened the very foundations of law and order. To them, anything less than the rope would be a victory for anarchy. The government is caught in the middle, but they are resolute. An attack on the police is an attack on the state, and the state must demonstrate its ultimate power. Inside his cell, Ned seems to have found a strange sense of peace. He is attended by priests, makes his confession, and prepares himself for death. He is allowed visitors. His mother, Delang, is brought from her own cell in the same prison to see him one last time. It's a heartbreaking meeting, according to legend. Her final words to him were not of pity or sorrow, but of stoic, unwavering resolve. Mind you die like a Kelly, son. He is also visited by artists and photographers. The era of the celebrity outlaw is in full swing, and the public has an insatiable appetite for his image. He poses for photographs, a calm, almost serene expression on his face. A death mask is even commissioned, a plaster cast to be taken of his head after the execution, a common but macabre practice of the time used for the pseudoscientific study of phrenology, which sought to determine a person's character from the shape of their skull. Historians still debate the purpose of these final portraits. Was Ned controlling his image to the very end, ensuring he would be remembered as a calm martyr rather than a broken criminal? Or was he simply a man resigned to his fate, passively obliging the requests of his captors? The day of the execution is set for November 11th. Yelbabading. On that morning, a huge crowd gathers outside the walls of the old Melbourne Gaol. They are a mix of the morbidly curious, die-hard supporters praying for a last-minute miracle, and those who have come to celebrate the final victory of the law. The atmosphere is tense, a public holiday of death. Inside, the grim preparations are made. The hangman, a man named Elijah Upjohn, checks the rope in the trapdoor. Ned is led from his cell. He walks calmly, without resistance. When asked for his last words, he is reported to have once again uttered that simple, profound phrase, "Such is life." He is stood upon the trapdoor. The white hood is placed over his head, and the noose is fitted around his neck. The lever is pulled. The trapdoor springs open, and in an instant, the life of Edward Kelly, the bushranger, the rebel, the folk hero, is extinguished. The curse he laid upon Judge Redmond Barry proves strangely prophetic. Just 12 days after Ned Kelly is hanged, the judge, who had appeared to be in perfect health, falls ill with what was described as a carbuncle in the neck. He dies suddenly. To Ned's supporters, it is divine retribution, the final proof that their hero's cause was just. The two adversaries, the judge and the outlaw, have indeed met their where I go, far sooner than anyone could have expected. The man is dead, but the story, the legend, is now immortal. The man is dead, but the story, the legend, is now immortal. The hanging of Ned Kelly was meant to be an end, a full stop. The authorities hoped that by extinguishing his life, they would extinguish the fire of rebellion he represented. They could not have been more wrong. His death was merely the beginning of his second, and far longer, life as a myth. In the immediate aftermath, the establishment did its best to bury him, both literally and figuratively. His body was not returned to his family but was buried in an unmarked grave in the yard of the old Melbourne Gaol, alongside the remains of other executed criminals. But even in death, Ned Kelly refused to rest in peace. The story of his physical remains becomes a bizarre, tangled epilogue to his life. His skull, it is believed, was separated from his body, possibly during the creation of his death mask. For years, it was passed around, kept as a ghoulish souvenir, even allegedly used as a paperweight on a police commissioner's desk. It was stolen, recovered, put on display, and became the subject of intense scientific and public fascination. It was only in 2011, after extensive DNA testing comparing it to a living descendant of Kelly's sister, that the skull was definitively identified and the strange journey of his remains could finally come to a close. He was at last given a proper burial by his family, laid to rest in a small country cemetery, more than 130 years after his execution. But the legend needed no body. It grew and flourished in the soil of the Australian imagination. Why does this one man, this 19th century horse thief and police killer, hold such a powerful grip on the national psyche? This is the great question that historians, sociologists, and artists have been wrestling with ever since. The answer is complex. He was the ultimate underdog, a poor Irish selector who dared to stand up to the immense power of the squatters, the police, and the British colonial government. His story is a classic David and Goliath tale. He was articulate and charismatic, a man who could command loyalty and write a manifesto that, even in its rough-hewn prose, burned with a righteous fire. And, of course, there was the armor, the image of the lone man encased in homemade steel, walking into a hail of bullets, is an image of such raw, defiant power that it is impossible to forget. It transformed him from a mere outlaw into a figure of folklore. This brings us to the central, enduring debate. Was he a hero or a villain? A social revolutionary or a common criminal? There is no easy answer, and that is precisely why the legend endures. The case for villain is strong. He was a convicted thief. He was responsible for the deaths of 3 policemen at Stringy Bark Creek. His final, desperate plan at Glenrowan involved the calculated, mass murder of dozens of people in a train derailment, an act that can only be described as terrorism. His defenders, this argument goes, are romantic fools who ignore the brutal reality of his crimes. The case for Hero is equally passionate. He was a product of a corrupt and unjust system that targeted him and his family from a young age. The police were often brutal and prejudiced, and the courts were biased in favor of the wealthy. Every step he took towards becoming an outlaw was, his supporters argue, a direct reaction to an injustice pushed upon him. He was not a born criminal, but a man made into one, a freedom fighter for his oppressed class. Ultimately, Ned Kelly has become a symbol, a blank canvas onto which Australia projects its own complex identity. He represents a deep-seated national distrust of authority, a belief in a fair go for the little guy, and a romantic admiration for the rebel who lives by his own rules. Hero or villain, the truth is, he was both, a flawed, violent, and brilliant man who lived and died in a way that ensured he would never be forgotten. He is Australia's necessary outlaw. And so, the story fades. The dust of the Australian bush settles, and the echoes of the gunshots at Glenrowan become as faint as the hum of the fan in your room. The iron arm, once a symbol of defiance, now rests cold and silent behind museum glass. The passionate arguments of the trial have long since dissolved into the quiet of the past. You can let him go now. Let Ned, and Dan, Joe, and Steve ride back into the mists of history, which look a lot like the edges of a dream. Let the police and the trackers and the judges and the betrayers all take their places in that long, slow procession of shadows. Their struggles are over. Their time is done. And your time, now, is for rest. Feel the weight of the blanket around you, a gentle pressure that holds you safe. Feel your breathing slow, deepening into a steady, peaceful rhythm. The whispers of the past are quiet now. There is only the soft sound of your own breathing, in undoubt, a quiet tide pulling you deeper into sleep. The day is over. The story is told. Sleep now. The end of the article. Good night.